Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Respect, Humility, Empathy podcast. I'm Marshall Law. This is Isaiah Diesel, and we are here with Darrington, and we're going to talk about a really cool subject today, an interesting subject because it's one that most of us have some experience with, and that's the topic of bullying. Some of us have been the bully. A lot of us have been on the other side, but we're going to talk about it today, and maybe some of what we share today will resonate with you and help illuminate your journey on your path. Isaiah, over to you, man.
Isaiah Diesel here. Thank you for joining us today. Darrington, can you tell us where you're calling out of?
Yeah, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix?
Yeah.
I actually got a phoenix tattooed on my my left leg. It's like a phoenix being reborn in on itself. It's pretty cool. I got it done in Israel.
Nice.
But can you tell us a little bit about how you and I met? I think that's a good starter.
Yeah, so I'm on this Facebook group for anti-theists, and I saw you had posted a message kind of looking for people who'd be interested in having a conversation. So, you know, I had jumped in initially just sort of like, maybe this isn't the right place for this conversation. Like, you know, maybe you've walked down the wrong back alley. 'Cause, you know, so I was kind of trying to gently point you towards some areas on venues on the internet that might be a little bit more hospitable.
Actually, we just wrapped up about 5 minutes ago with another girl from the group, so we had a very good talk about the movie industry because she makes movies.
Mm-hmm.
She's a producer, and but actually, it's very, very, very relevant topic. Why I asked you about that, because I'm not sure. Did you see there were quite a few people that were cyberbullying me? Did you see that?
Yeah, it had, some of the comments had gotten rough. I mean,
yeah.
I want to be fair to the group because there were some commenters in there that were supportive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, but there was definitely some what you might even consider it abusive behavior.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the guys, we've already talked to him. His name is a gentleman by the name of Leo, who goes by Goose.
Moose.
I'm
saw
sorry.
That podcast. I watched that podcast.
Oh, you did? All right, great. Yeah. So okay, great. So Moose. So I forgot to ask him this. Maybe you can answer this, but if the plural of goose is geese, why isn't the plural of moose meese? No? All right.
It's
that
English,
was a joke.
man.
That was a very
English.
bad joke. That was a very unfunny joke, Darrington.
English is the bully of languages. You know?
I was trying to break some ice here, Darrington, so at least give me like a sympathy laugh. But, you know, I want to ask you, because somebody asked me to define this, and I was like, okay, I did this podcast with another atheist guy, and I asked him to define anti-theism, and he said, it's the belief that nobody should believe in God. Would you define, how would you define where you're at on that spectrum, and why? Between like the one, Marshall's at a 5.6?
5.5, I suppose. Between 5 and 6, really.
It
depends on whether or not I've had my coffee.
I was going to say, I'm trying to break him down like one fraction point a week. So maybe in like 5 months, I might be able to get him to like a 2 or something. But where do you fall in that what is it called? The doctrine?
It's the Dawkins scale. Yeah, the scale for atheism. So with 1 being, I absolutely positively believe and know that God exists. And 7 being, I absolutely positively know there's no possible way that a God exists. And then there's the whole spectrum in between. So there you go.
Why are you where you're at, Marshall?
Oh, well, as I have said on most episodes, I am agnostic on the question of God, but I'm an atheist in your religion. And the reason why I have to be agnostic on the question of God is because I can't actually make a knowledge claim about something that I don't have knowledge about. which is kind of, was there something before the Big Bang? Is there something outside of this universe?
Mm-hmm.
I have no way of knowing that. All I know
Mm-hmm.
is the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, because I don't know one way or the other what is outside or before, I don't even know that there is a before the universe. And because of that lack of knowledge, I can't make a conclusive statement about it, which is the reason for that little tiny drop of agnosticism. But again, when it comes to everybody's particular religion, definitely an atheist.
So what do you think, Darrington?
Well, I think there's a number of ways you could parse this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Dawkins scale, it sounds like Gnostics versus agnostics, just naively to me. And I guess on the Dawkins scale, I would fall on like a solid 0, and it's not so much like certainty that there is no God, but the question is like what are we talking about when we're talking about God? Are we talking about God as presented by theism? Then yeah, I don't think that God is even self-consistent. Now, if you want to talk,
How so?
there's a ton of examples, but let's talk about like the problem of evil. Right?
Okay, problem of evil. There you go.
Which I'm sure we're all familiar with. That's self-inconsistent. It's like a plot hole in a movie, right? Where you're just like it's not even following its own rules. So yeah,
I hate when movies do that.
maybe there is something out there, right?
Uh-huh.
But whatever it is, it's not in any way going to look like the divinity that comes out of the pages of any of our imaginations, right? The imaginations of our ancestors.
Okay.
So that's where I land on that scale, and I would say that the anti-theist takes it one step further on that claim to special knowledge, because it says like basically, I think Christopher Hitchens,
Mm-hmm.
had made a good point to say the anti-theist says not only do I not know, but you cannot know either. The prophet cannot make a claim to special knowledge that can't be demonstrable to everybody else.
So, okay. So then I think when I hear the word anti, I think against something. Okay. So I found this concept self-contradictory for two different reasons. But if you explain it that way, then I guess maybe I was just wrong, because I think of this of two ways. One is that he couldn't be against something that doesn't exist. So I can't be anti-Santa Claus because he doesn't exist, right? So that doesn't make sense. And then the other way is if he does exist, then what sense would it make to oppose someone who's infinitely powerful? Like, because Hitchens and I had quite a bit of respect for some of the arguments he was making, but this one I didn't find there was any kind of remote logical consistency behind what he was saying, because what he was saying was that if God creates you, he basically says like, so what? Okay, God creates you, but even if he proves everything, then it doesn't really prove anything. And I'm like, I just couldn't follow the line of reasoning that he was saying. But that's neither here nor there. We're just trying to yeah.
I think the anti part is really talking about the anti religion, right? Because religion does make a claim to authority based off of prophecy, so special knowledge. And so yeah, I think the world would be I think the world would be a better place if we didn't make our value decisions based off of faith, right? If we made our value decisions based off of real, tangible, like demonstrable evidence. But I also believe that everybody has a right to believe what they want to believe, and I will fight for that right. And look, in the long run, I personally think that we're just sort of gonna, I don't mean this in a bad way, we're just gonna sort of evolve out of religion. It was something that we needed to get past a certain stage in our development as a civilization, and at some point it's just gonna be kind of silly to us. And so we can just the anti-theist can just kind of wait it out. I
love this, Marshall. I love hearing different perspectives. This is great.
Yeah.
Oh, I think
But for the abuses of religion and the status quo.
Sure.
right.
Yeah. But anyway.
We're not. This is going to be the last that we're discussing about this topic, but maybe I would love to go on you one-on-one, and not like arguing, but just talking about some of these issues specifically, because I really do think that there's logical explanations for a lot of that, but that's not the subject of this topic. What we're talking about today is bullying. I want to ask you a few questions and first start off with my experience with bullying. I think anybody who ever becomes a bully, it's a learned behavior. So I think you learn it from experiencing it yourself. And I had a mom who was, well, you've already heard some of the story, but what I didn't say behind that was that she's a Vietnam veteran. So growing up, she would tell us stories about being with guys who were halfway blown up and dying. You know what I mean? So, and she's like 18 years old, and she left for the military to be because she had an abusive family, which is exactly what Leo was talking about in that podcast. So as a result of all of this trauma, she developed PTSD. And so there were times where I think she literally couldn't control the things that she was doing and saying. And but as a kid, you don't understand anything like that. You know, the only thing you understand is my mom's making me feel like a piece of garbage right now. So when you start to feel that way, one of the ways I felt like I could gain control over the situation was through words. It was like my retreat. So it was like my self-defense mechanism. So I hate the fact, looking back, especially with the daughter now, knowing that I was a bully in the past to other people, but I also now know after counseling how that started in my life. And I'm not proud of it, but I don't want to deny that happened. So that's my own experience. I want to ask you about your own personal, if you've had any experiences one way or the other, and what do you think, what causes bullying?
I had a really great family growing up. My mom came from a very kind of strict Mormon family, and
Mormon, wow.
Yeah, and my dad, his family came from Kentucky. His mom brought him here to Phoenix to escape an abusive husband, and they were very sort of hillbilly, kind of Pentecostal background. So it was an interesting mix growing up.
I was going to say that's well.
But our family was always very tight, and I don't feel like there was any bullying going on inside of the family.
Okay.
Or even inside of the church, if I'm being fair, because like the church on either side has been nothing but good to me. Where I experienced it was mostly when I started going to public school, because the area that I was in, demographically, I was the only person of fair skin. Right.
The only white person.
Yeah. And, looking back on it, I can understand the animosity, right? And the, what was going on there, why I was getting, beat up every day, for just, being the color of the skin that I was. But at the time, I didn't understand any of that.
Of course.
Right.
And is that by black kids or Mexican, like Latinos?
Latinos.
That's fine. I'm Mexican, so I mean,
yeah.
Just talking about it. Don't worry about the racism or anything like that. Let's discuss it.
It was really interesting. There were some other white kids at the school, some sort of rowdy cowboy-like guys that kind of stuck to themselves. But they would beat me up too, right? Like I'd be walking home and a pickup truck would pull off on the side of the road, jump out, and they'd chase me down with like, axe handles and stuff.
My God.
It was an experience.
What's going through your mind all this time, man?
At the time, you're trying to make sense of the world. And I think as a kid, you just accept it as this is the way the world is. And so you try to get through day by day. And, I did have a good support structure. So by the time, if I made it home, I had I had strong support structure there. And then getting out of that, moving into the real world and having the reality shock that, the rest of the world isn't like this little rural community in the middle of the desert, was kind of a culture shock as well. And that's where I really found my power, because that experience taught me the empathy that I needed to stand up for the people who were being bullied. So that's kind of
you just put chills on me.
my experience. Bullying is my button, like the one thing that sets me off. I cannot stand it, and I cannot stand by when it's happening.
But why do you think people do it though? Because I really think bullies get a bad name, and they should. But I think in my own view is that if you loved yourself, then you couldn't bully someone else, because you know that you harm yourself in the process. So my bullying really stemmed from my self-hatred. And once I addressed that, like, bullying is the last thing I want to do now in the universe. I want to build people up now. But
yeah.
What do you think about the psyche of a bully?
We're all victims of our circumstances, regardless of who you are. And the bully is a victim as well. Right? Let's not forget, getting back to the situation that you had in the Facebook group, all of those people who posted abusive comments to you are in that group because they were hurt by someone, right? That anti-theist group is a place for people to kind of like get out all of these bad emotions so that they don't have to take it out into the rest of the world. It's like sort of the equivalent of a vomitorium. So when you go in there and you're saying like, why is there vomit on the walls? Well, because it's a vomitorium. Like, that's what that place is for us to be angry and be ridiculous and, slap each other on the face. And then we can walk out and be at peace. And I think in a lot of ways, bullies in the real world don't have a coping mechanism like that. They don't have a support system. So their only survival response, right, is to take that thing that's been inflicted on them and inflict it on somebody else. That's just an opinion, right? I don't have any science to back that up.
No, that makes sense. Marshall?
I want to start off by saying I made so much money when I was a bully. I can't tell you how much lunch money I generated. Wow, I had a lot of money. I'm joking, actually. I was actually more likely to be on the receiving end because I was kind of different and weird. So I was a target too. So I empathize. And I guess the question I want to throw out here is kind of a practical one, especially for our listeners who are identifying with us on the receiving end. But my question to you, Darrington, is what works to survive bullying? Like, what would you tell a young person who is suffering with this? How do they cope with it? How do they survive this?
I had a really good friend of mine told me once, and I'll never forget it, when I was going through my divorce. He said, you're going to try and blame yourself. And this is I want to pass this on to any other victim and in the bullies, right? Everybody. If I have one message, right, you're going to try and blame yourself. It is not your fault. And it sounds silly, right? It sounds cliche, but you need to look yourself in the eye, and we need to look each other in the eye and say, this is not your fault. You are responsible for yourself and your actions, but you're not responsible for your environment, right? So once we can forgive ourselves and we can forgive each other, then we can work towards making the world better tomorrow than it was yesterday. Wow. And that's it sticks with me, right? I remember it every day. So I call it Osgood's Law.
That's your friend, Osgood?
Yeah.
Smart man. Let me interject for 1 second and say, have you read the 4 agreements? Don Miguel Ruiz?
No.
So it's like Toltec wisdom. It's like ancient Native American wisdom. And so there's 4 things that you got to learn to master. One of them is to be be impeccable with your words. Another one is to always give your best. And he says like that can change at different times. You know, you can't always give the same from day to day, but you can always give your best. And another one that just really stands out, I really wish people would get their hands on this book, or at least this concept, that he says, don't ever take something personally. He says, because whatever someone else says, it's reflecting what's inside of them and not you, you know, so they're externalizing. And so a lot of people, rightfully so, were really down on Trump for a lot of the cyberbullying that he was doing. And I was vocal about it. But on the other hand, if I take a step back and take a look at this objectively, I say, well, he's projecting whatever's going on inside of his internally. And I could have predicted exactly what his childhood was like, but I think his niece released a book about him, and she confirmed every last thing I would have thought about him, which is that his dad was like overbearing perfectionist and made him feel like garbage. And basically his dad is probably a narcissist as well. So people who have narcissistic personalities, they have a fracture inside of themselves and they overcompensate for it. So I was just thinking about this today when thinking about what to say. And if you were to walk into a room and you were like the smartest person in that room, that would be like, okay, maybe that's possible. But if you were to walk into like a stadium and you say, okay, I'm not only the smartest person in this room, I'm the best looking person in this room, I can get the most girls in anyone, and I just went on and on about 10 different things, the likelihood of that happening would be astronomically zero. But that's not even what Trump says. He says, I'm the smartest in everything. I don't think he's ever said anything that he wasn't the best at, you know? So I'm like, what's the likelihood that you're even one? You know what I mean? So that's an overcompensation though. And I understand it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it, not like it, but I understand where he's coming from. And in that sense, I pity the guy. I mean, I hate the behavior, but you know, when I was in middle school, we used to take people's names and try to flip them around or try to take syllables and make them into funny names, you know, really immature stuff. And it stopped in middle school though. And I'm thinking, this guy's continually doing this at the age of 70. So what does that say about where he is internally, you know? And this is like, I'm not trying to bash him. I'm genuinely empathizing with the guy because I've been in that same exact place.
Yeah, I was the sheriff growing up, but I was also Marshmallow and a few other things. Yeah. So I had these names. Don't bully me now. Don't bully me. But yeah, you know, that happens. And there is one thing I do want to talk about. Like when I interact with some of my friends, almost always guy friends, we're constantly ragging on each other, teasing each other, making fun. And that's actually what a lot of guys kind of do, at least here in America, in my experience. Guys who like each other, who get along, who are friends.
You like right.
We're constantly, you know, putting each other down.
Yeah.
But it's done in a way that everybody knows you're joking. Everybody, you know, it's just part of the fun. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that if you see some of that happening, it's not necessarily bullying behavior.
Right.
It's just guys bantering, being guys.
Sure.
But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get that. I get what you're saying. Totally.
But
and
adult. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
No, good.
See, we're so respectful. We're just letting each other, you know, go.
We should start finishing each other's sentences.
There you go. But what about adult bullying? You know, that's another thing, because that does happen. It happens in workplaces. I think you were just talking about this with regards to our former president. You know, he's really engaging in adult bullying, you know. And now your coffee's gone, so I still have some of mine. I'm bullying you. But
I was just looking at this, and it's actually, my daughter's definitely not going to be a Picasso, but she made this for me.
Oh, wow.
Really? That's
Yeah.
actually really nice. Anyway, adult bullying is a thing. And I'm just kind of curious if anybody amongst the three of us has any experience with adult bullying. And by the way, I'd be interested in having an actual bully on the show at some point to get that other perspective. I don't think they would come on, though. They don't have that kind of courage, you know?
Well, I'll start off first, and I will say I had very, very, very low self-esteem. I mean, it's hard, can't even put it and can't even articulate how low it was. So one of the ways that would make me feel better was to bully. And that happened well until maybe around the age of 30, until I got divorced. I got divorced from my wife at the age of 29. And just tell you a little backstory at Darrington. Now I moved back to America, met Christ, came back to South Korea after 5 years divorce, and she got pregnant the first night I came back. So my daughter was born right in the Olympics, so just her third birthday. But that anger was I was bullying my wife. There's no other way to say it. I was bullying my wife. I mean, I wasn't physically hitting her or anything like that, but it was psychological. It was verbal. And after I became a Christian, my family thought that I was having a mental breakdown, because actually I had an experience where Jesus Christ spoke to me in my room, and everybody thought I was going mentally insane. And so they sat me down and they said, "You are going to counseling tomorrow. You do not have a choice." And I was like, just totally dejected. And so the next morning, my brother went in to the triage thing, and they asked me questions for like an hour and a half. It was the most embarrassing hour and a half of my life, because it's so crazy when you articulate the things that you've done. It's a different when you're just do it, and it doesn't register in your mind the same way that when you articulate it. And in fact, my counselor even said there's a reluctance to talk about it. So they would literally have us, they would do art. They would make us do art because they said it's more free flowing when you do it. So I drew a picture of myself and I titled this Board and Her. And it was a woman, it was a picture of a woman holding the hand of like a board. Like literally, I drew myself as like a door, and the woman was alive, and I was just like dead inside. You know, I was totally. And so if I tell you how many times that came out to other people, I wouldn't, it would be in the thousands of times. So I had to get counseling to fix that side of me. And, you know, a lot of journaling though. So I would definitely talk about journaling, and just really, you know, journaling your ideas. If you are bullied, to get your ideas out there, like, why are you doing this? I don't think a lot of people could really genuinely tell you why they're doing the things that they do. They kind of just get on autopilot, you know? So I think you need time to reflect, and talking to a counselor is really good because they can help lead you along the way.
Hey, Darrington, I do want to throw this out there. I think you're really good. Yeah, you've given good, thoughtful responses. You sound good on audio. You're all right, man. I'm really pleased with your appearance on here today. Right?
My head is swelling, but thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing great. You're doing awesome.
Yeah, great. So are you familiar with Candace Owens Darrington?
Her name doesn't ring a bell, no.
So she's an African American conservative that is extremely, extremely toxic. She in fact engages in cyberbullying herself, but she actually started off as like a liberal, and she had wanted to do a project where they were basically going to categorize everyone's online cyberbullying, and then people could see, you know, if people were basically like whistleblowing.
Yeah.
But then like the liberals got like really upset with her that she wanted to do that, and so that kind of like, I guess that caused her to become a conservative. But I want to ask you what do you think about that idea, and should there be any, what should the consequences be, or any, of cyberbullying?
Cyberbullying is a special domain, in my opinion, right? Because to me, for something to be bullying, it has to be irrational, it has to be ostracizing, and it has to be asymmetrical, right? So, like, when a schoolyard bully is bullying and you're the victim, right? There's no way to rationalize that. You're just the person in the room who was the target for whatever reason. And you have no power to change the situation, right? The power dynamic is completely on the bully's side, whether it be physical or a group of kids, ganging up on someone else. And I think most importantly, it's this idea of ostracizing. You're becoming the other, and that comes from evolutionary baggage. Like, our ancestors a long time ago, had developed, for whatever reason, this need to be able to villainize or demonize the other. And we're still dealing with the consequences of that. So most of us get through that in our childhood. We've all probably experienced the experience of being the bully in some situation, and we've all probably experienced the experience of having been bullied, and then we kind of mature out of it. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who don't. Mm-hmm. The online situation is new to us, right? This last generation is the first of our species to have a situation where you can be anonymous and bullied, right? And that's cathartic. We like that because you can get angry at somebody but not experience the consequences. There's also another side of that, right? This bully, like if I go to a Facebook group or 4chan or whatever, this bully can't punch me in the face, right? I can escape this situation. I can simply go to another medium. So it's not asymmetrical in that regard. I have power, at least as much power as the person who's talking trash, right? And it's
trolling.
Yeah, you can block them.
Yeah, you can block them. You can go somewhere else. You can leave the conversation. There are situations where they push, and that online bullying comes into the real world, and I think that is bullying. But if we're just talking about somebody talking garbage on the internet, telling you you're ugly or whatever, like, you got to build up a tolerance to that, because it's not real, right? We feel like it's real because our monkey brains think it's the same thing as somebody about to punch us in the face, but it's not.
Oh, that's a good point. Actually, Dale Carnegie says that things like that, you got to let it slide off of your back like rain. He said, just let it go down your. So
yeah. You brought up a really cool point, Darrington, that I wanted to ask about, which is, isn't bullying part of nature? Doesn't it serve to establish, pecking order? Not everybody can be at the top of the food chain, if you will, or the social chain or network, whatever it may be. Should we therefore tolerate it to some degree, do you think? Or is it absolutely always bad, wrong, and we should do everything we can to combat it,
right. Or whatever consequences, because don't forget that one.
I think it depends on the venue, right? If you're going to a place, the acceptable behavior in a church is not the same thing as acceptable behavior in a boxing gym. Mm-hmm. Right. In a boxing gym, we're going to be talking smack to each other. We're going to be bantering. You're trying to get under each other's skin so you can thicken yourself up. So, the night of the match, the other guy can't say something that makes you lose your temper. So this kind of horseplay is important to build up tolerance. And I think that takes me back to like public school. If public school taught me anything at all, it's to thicken my skin and build up tolerances against that type of attack. You can't call me a funny name. Like, I can't call Marshall. I'm sure you feel the same way. You can't make fun of your name anymore and get under your skin. Like, you're inoculated to that kind of activity. And the only way you get inoculated is through horseplay.
So So you tend to think that some of the maybe some of the way the liberals have seen, like with cancel culture or hotbed words, like maybe they've gone a little bit extreme with that. Would you agree with that?
I think that part of what they're failing to recognize is that there have to be we have to have these sort of vomitoriums, these emotional vomitoriums. So if you're someone who is actually attacking somebody out on Twitter, yeah, maybe you should have some social repercussions, but it should be like the consequences should be the same as if somebody farted in an elevator. Right. We just kind of all react with disgust and back up, and nobody talks to you for a few days. You don't need a slap on the wrist. You don't need to go to Twitter jail, right?
Get fired.
Right. You don't need to get fired. And especially if it's done in a venue where that type of behavior is necessary for that venue to operate.
Any chance you've seen Cobra Kai?
No, it's funny. We were just talking about that last night.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm 40.
40. Oh God! So you definitely saw Karate Kid.
Oh yeah.
So Karate Kid was like Karate Kid and the Never Ending Story were like scripture for me growing up. That's like
Yeah.
There was Bible and then Karate Kid and like those guys were tied for 2 and 3. But you know, Johnny Lawrence is supposed to be like considered one of the worst like bullies of all time. Like sorry, as far as film, one of the best bullies. It's very I don't want to give away any spoilers, but let's just say because you really should watch it, but it deals a lot with bullying. And in fact, they deal with cyberbullying, as you're talking about. And one of the lines he says on there, he says, this girl tells him that she's being cyberbullied anonymously. And he's like, oh, God, that's horrible. And she's like, he goes, when I was a kid, he goes, when you wanted to bully someone, you did it to their face. He goes, there was honor, there was respect. And he didn't even see the irony of what he was saying, you know. And I think sometimes, honestly, you're just in a moment, and maybe sometimes it's not even intentional, you know. Like I that's why I'm not sure if you noticed in that thread, I didn't respond back to anybody. I mean, I responded, but I wasn't. There's this quote, this thought is that you don't go into the mud with people, you know, or if you entertain a clown, then you become a part of the circus. So for me, I know what I'm trying to do with this podcast. I know I'm a nobody. I don't have like, I'm not an expert. We don't have a huge following, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provide a healthy, safe environment where people can agree, they can disagree, but along the way, we can be honest about, hey, our limitations, our background. I'm not trying to hide the fact that I was a bully, you know? Who would admit that they're a bully up until the age of 30, about 30, you know? It's a hard thing to do. It's so painful, especially having a daughter now, and especially in South Korea where cyberbullying has led to a lot of deaths. That is so painful in my life to admit that, you know. But on the other hand, it's like, hey, if we don't address these things, if we don't show people how to argue properly, you know, because I quoted Dale Carnegie. I got my hands on his book right after I got divorced, and I started reading it, and it started to help me. I started to see what was wrong with me, truly, how to win friends and influence people. But one of the things he does in there, and maybe I'll post a link to this because I created the notes for this, but it's how to argue with someone. Like one of the things that he says, I think is so important is that it says, avoid your first impression, because it's like it's very frequently wrong. And I can't tell how many times my first impression of someone has been wrong, you know? And I think maybe some people were getting that about me. And I think if they would have read that, they would say, hey, you know what? I'm not trying to tell you guys off. Some people said I was trying to set them up on there, you know, but you saw the first one that we did, and we're just trying to show respect. We're trying to say, hey, it's fine to agree to disagree. Marshall and I agree to disagree all the time.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So actually, there's one other thing. One other thing I want to ask a question, but I just want to tell you about how the idea for this started. There's another host before this, atheist, and we met at an atheist like support group as Christian, but I actually went there like with the express intent to debate him, and it was at a pizza parlor. So we were there and we had a pizza and we had a couple of pitchers of beer and we talked for like 3 hours and we hit it off so well, you know? So I think if people really just got time to, you know, spend time with each other and not talk about things that they know that they're going to disagree on, you know, because we agree about 90% of life. It's like everybody gets caught up on that 10%. So what do you think we could do to like humanize people more, Darrington?
So I like the idea of respect, but
Mhm.
you know, I don't have to respect you to be courteous. I mean, I respect you, but if I'm having a conversation with somebody who maybe I don't respect, right, I can still be courteous and I can still have a conversation, understand that they're a human being with multiple dimensions and there's a lot more to them. So I think you're onto something with that. Don't listen to your first impressions. But I also think that we often get onto this conversation about like our cosmological viewpoints define us, when really there's more in common between you and me than there is between, say,
Me
you
and a
know, like,
Trumpster.
right, or you and the Baptist church that's down the road from me, right? Who, you know, you both believe in God, but honestly, that's about where it ends. And there's so much more in this world that's interesting to talk about besides these sort of big cosmological questions. The Trump thing, by the way, I do want to mention, I don't think that that's bullying. It's not irrational. In my mind, it's methodical. I think that there are people in the world that have learned how to use this as a weapon. It appears to me like Trump was a person who has learned to weaponize this behavior and make it work for him. And it's obviously done well for the guy, right? Like he's good at it and he benefits highly from it. So I think it does the term bullying a disservice to call what these people who weaponize bullying bullying, right? It's something else.
Because at a fundamental level, he sought to dehumanize some kind of human beings in some way or another, and I think I told Marshall this, is that Hitler didn't start off with gassing people. That's not the first step he did. The first step he did was to write a book. All right. And the second step he did was start to talk about it. Yeah. And then the third step he did was that he started to lock people up. All right, put him in, and then the fourth step was that. So that started first though with dehumanizing. So I don't want to quote the Bible too much, but I'm going to quote the Bible here and say that James says that he says that with our mouths we both praise God, and then we turn around and we curse someone who's created in his image. So James take it so far as to say verbally attacking someone is a human rights violation in his idea that, and not to say, okay, something's wrong with you, like you need to do that. Like really, a lot of my problem with Christians is what you were talking about, is that nobody was saying that. It was becoming normalized. And, you know, and then I would say like, hey, this is really unhealthy. I made some sermons about it. And Christians are like, oh, well, you just support that, whoever. And I'm like, no, I never said that. I never said you can't assume that I support something else because I don't support one thing. So that's another one of those things with avoiding your first assumptions. But yeah, I think ultimately, not just online, but verbally, he was seeking to debase people for lots of different ways. I mean, one of the most horrific things, I think, it's hard to say which one is most horrific, but he said that he wouldn't have sexually assaulted one of these women because she was so ugly.
Yeah.
And it's like, what relevance does it have to do with someone, whether or not someone would sexually abuse someone? You know, it's the most non sequitur saying, you know, it's basically putting value on someone because of how they look, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, as a Christian, I had to say, you guys need to call this out because you're not supporting him. If you don't check this behavior, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And it did up until the point where people are storming the Capitol. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
I called it 5 years ago, but how do you think, let's say you see someone bullying, what do you think appropriate response would be to try to call them out on it, or to try to, out of love? Maybe it's a friend or a relative, because I actually have some relatives like that. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, no, that's hard. Probably for a lot of the same reasons why the Christian right couldn't call out Donald Trump. But you know, you have to intervene. It's important to intervene. But I think it's important to give just a moment to allow the victim to take a stand, right? You don't want to be white knighting. You don't want to be jumping in and defending every single person, because they really need that opportunity. The victim needs the opportunity to stand up for themselves and prove to themselves that they have what it takes to not be bullied. Because it's a development process, right? So you got to give just a little bit of time for them to pull themselves out of the water. And then if you see them drowning, then you have to intervene, and you have to kind of, you know, jump in, stop the situation, and then pull maybe both of them aside and give them the treatment that they need, right? So like for the victim, it's not your fault, you know, you can do better, kind of, you know, pick yourself back up. It's okay to feel this way, but we're going to try and feel better tomorrow. We're going to try and be better tomorrow. And then for the bully, almost the exact same thing, right? Like that behavior is not acceptable, mister. But then you have to work about why that behavior was thought to be acceptable in the first place. So you can't do that with the power dynamics of the American political system. Once somebody is the president, right, they leverage the power of their party. And anybody who tries to pull them aside and say, you farted in the elevator, is going to get primaried. Yeah. So, you know, in a family circumstance, obviously at some point it becomes abusive. And so there's different remedies for different levels. But early on, if we're just talking about like the schoolyard bullying kind of definition, you can intervene and just kind of give some love. These people who are methodically weaponizing bullying, they need to be dealt with a completely different way, and I don't have the answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I found that when I suffered bullying, my friends who expressed care, concern, sympathy, who helped out on some level, that was precious. That was invaluable. That's what really helped me to survive and kind of limited the damage or the trauma that was caused by some of the behavior I received. I'd also like to say that some of my schoolyard bullies have later become friends because they matured out of it. And they acknowledged, hey, I was kind of a jerk to you. I'm really sorry about that. And that means a lot. So if you're one of the people who's been a bully, and, you know, I think most adults can forgive a certain degree of childish behavior and immaturity because obviously we were children. So I tend not to hold that against my peers as we all kind of grow older together and we're all in the same social networks in the same graduating class. I'm very quick to pardon because, like I think Darrington pointed out, a lot of these people have their own trauma that they were dealing with as children, and that's why they acted out the way they did. Because remember, you're talking about children in many cases. What I have a hard time forgiving, however, is when I see adults engage in this behavior or they haven't ever matured out of this behavior. Those are the people who need a lot of work. because I worry about their children. I worry about their family. I think they're probably creating a lot of chaos and trauma in their world, their coworkers, and really, if I were a Christian, I'd say pray for them because I don't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm. I believe in prayer for sure.
Tim mentioned I was watching some old stuff of his, and he says, the two things to remember is be compassionate and make sure that there are social consequences for people who are rude, to people who are not compassionate. So if you're working with somebody and like everything's great, but they're just like really to the waitresses, right? That says something about their character. And, you may want to talk to them about that, but at some point you may just be like, I don't want to work with you anymore. Get out of the elevator that they're farting in.
Man, you must love the movie Liar Liar
jokes with me.
Liar Liar.
Yeah, it's all fart jokes with me. Sorry.
He farts on there. I got a really kind of philosophical, little theological, little sociological, but what are you doing with the Yoda in the background over there, man?
That's my little Yoda backpack. I've had him for like forever. He watches over me.
Okay. You must love the Mandalorian then.
I do. I really like sci-fi and fantasy, and so the Mandalorian's good. To me, the Star Wars franchise is less actiony and more like what kind of moral values. I feel like I got a lot of moral values from the Star Wars movies, especially the early ones. Like truth is a matter of perspective, or Yoda's do or do not. There is no try. So that's the problem with being atheists is we don't really have a book. We have to kind of pick out our
cherry pick.
Well, yeah, you just pick the best little moral points from everything that you find.
What would your top three favorite sci-fi movie? I'm a sci-fi nut. I think sci-fi teaches us morality. It twists reality to the point where it shows us like breaking points of reality, and I think it's the most unique genre because it can transcend so many other different genres. You could have cowboy sci-fis, you could have horror, you could have one of my favorite. It's just technically a sci-fi, but it doesn't really play out like it. But Vanilla Sky, it's probably my second favorite movie of all time. One thing Marshall and I are doing is that we're talking about things to kind of, talk about some stuff. Like the other day we were talking about books because we're trying to find common ground. And so I think the more things we could talk about, whether it's movies or music or, so I would just like to do that for a second. If you could just tell me like your top threes of movies and bands. You kind of like a Slayer, maybe a Slayer fan with that hair.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of
death
really
metal.
all kinds of genre, death metal, heavy metal. I would say probably Tool is my like go-to. Like if there were two bands that I will just go to in a heartbeat, it's either Tool or Tenacious D, depending on my mood.
One more band.
I don't know, like 9 Inch Nails when I'm feeling depressed and I need to go down that spiral.
Yeah.
I was telling Marshall there's like three untouchables to me. Casablanca, the Casablanca 1984 for books, and then Nirvana, because Nirvana is just like, in fact, I was just there tonight with my wife doing karaoke with Nirvana. But what about you, Marsh?
Oh, favorite band, gotta be U2. I'm also big into Enya. Love everything she's produced. So Enya is a lot of time when I just kind of want to chill out, relax, or meditate, think about something. U2 kind of just whatever. But then the greatest sci-fi movie of all time ever made, 2001 Space Odyssey. Hands down, bar none, greatest sci-fi, period. Also my favorite author, Arthur C. Clarke. So, you got all that right there.
You clearly never saw Cloud Atlas then, right?
I have seen it. I think it's a fantastic movie. But again, 2001 is in a class all by itself.
All right, top 3, Darrington, and then we're gonna bring this in. What's your top 3 for
movies
yeah.
or books?
Oh, well, both. Well, let's hear them both.
Okay, so I would say right now the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov is
We were just talking about him.
Absolutely my favorite. I've reread it. It's the only book series that I've reread like 3 times.
Wow.
And it just like as I age, it gets better and better because I'm more mature and I can understand more things. So I would say that for the book series, and then the rest of the books I read are all nonfiction. They're all either like technical computer manuals or they're Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan, genius.
Yeah, my
amazing
personal
prose. Amazing prose.
Isaac Asimov, he tries to incorporate which I think the best sci-fi does. You try to incorporate realistic elements that could potentially be there one day, And he said of Carl Sagan that Carl Sagan is the only person he ever met that he left the conversation feeling like an absolute idiot.
Yeah,
so he was they're smart guys. But okay,
so
movies, last 3, and then
movies are hard ones to put into context. I love a lot of different movies. Recently I watched The Expanse, the last season, and I'd say I love hard sci-fi, and they just did it so well. So it's kind of soap opera-y, but if you're interested in hard sci-fi, like where gravity is important, totally worth watching The Expanse.
Do you watch Westworld?
Yeah, Westworld was really, really good. I loved Westworld. Kind of anything with that kind of thing, like even Battlestar Galactica, where you're, there's these philosophical questions about who are we, what is intelligence, what is consciousness. So yeah, I don't know if I could really nail it down to like a solid one, single movie.
If either of you haven't, check out Snowpiercer. I got to represent it because it's representing Korea, and Cloud Atlas is representing Korea, so I'm a little biased, but those are 2 of my favorites. But
Cloud Atlas was fantastic, and Snowpiercer was too. Yeah.
Yep.
You know what, Darrington, I'm looking right into the camera, and I really want you to know how much I appreciate your time. I know it's an early Saturday Saturday, right?
Yeah, here.
It's Sunday here. We're in the future. Talk about time travel. This is like you guys are in the past, man. So I'm like in a time machine here. But I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you reaching out in the group, man to man, person to person, computer to computer. That was really cool, and standing up for this, and just the way you explained what that group was makes me feel so much differently about like the way that I was treated. So that just helped to humanize and understand them so much. I really, really, really thank you. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart that I am sorry for the Christians who've given you guys a reason to think that. I mean, yesterday I had an hour and a half talk with the guest, and it's very hard to hear a lot of things that he was saying, that the way he's been treated by Christians. So I just sincerely apologize for that. So
I want to let Darrington know that I can probably guarantee 100% that your commentary today is going to help people. And so I want you to remember that and think about that for the rest of the day today, that the things you shared today are definitely going to help people. And so in some small way, you've already had an impact on this world through this podcast. Yeah, same. And I just want to thank you. It means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to put links to, if you're experiencing maybe suicidal thoughts, or if you've been cyberbullied, or any kind of mental health, Alcoholics Anonymous, all that stuff. We'll have links for everything in the video description.
Yeah,
So.
reach out. Yep.
Thank you guys for what you do.
All right.
I've been listening to your podcast. I'll be a subscriber and a longtime listener. So if you need anything, reach out.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we hope to see you back next time. This is RHE Podcast signing out, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.